City police officers searched this morning as they had for most of the night, looking for clues, evidence, anything that might help them solve the brutal murder of 14-year-old Wendy Jerome. The teen's body was found shortly before 11 last night in an outside doorway leading to the courtyard between schools 11 and 33 on Webster Avenue, just 3 blocks from her Denver Street home. Today, police knocked on doors and asked neighbors if they saw or heard anything last night. Wendy Jerome was a freshman at Edison Tech. Friends described her as a great little friend.
When I moved in the neighborhood, she was like the 3rd person I met. She came over because her friends lived next door to me, but felt pretty bad, really bad.
An autopsy showed that Wendy Jerome's death was caused by massive head trauma. Police hope that that autopsy report will include other information which might help them find their killer. Patrice Walsh, WOKR News.
Even as friends and relatives said goodbye to Wendy Jerome today, police say they have few leads in her murder. The 14-year-old girl's body bore the marks of a severe beating, including massive blows to her head. A man discovered her body near the rear of School 33 the day after Thanksgiving. Today, some preschoolers played in the park on the other side of the school. Their teachers say they're too young to understand what has happened, or to read the concern in their teachers' faces.
Imagine any parent that lives in this neighborhood would be very fearful. I would be if I lived here.
In today's pleasant weather, other residents in the neighborhood just off Webster Avenue did outside chores. Some said their neighborhood has had a rowdy reputation, but the violent murder shocked them.
Usually the park be filled. They be in that park 11, 12 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock at night, drinking, getting high, or behind the school, you know. But you don't see nobody no more. Don't nobody be out.
There are times when I do call the house just about every night just to see how things are going from work.
Some days before the brutal murder of teenager Wendy Jerome, and only blocks away from where her body was to be discovered, a husband returned to his home here at 55 Rosemary Drive to find his wife beaten and stabbed. So far, police are not connecting the assault and the murder. Marty Griffin, WOKR News.
It's over. It's finally over.
A very emotional day, a major break in a Rochester cold case. A man now charged in the slaying of a teenage girl here on Thanksgiving night back in 1984. Good evening, I'm Don Alhart. Rochester police say 56-year-old Timothy Williams is the man who raped and killed 14-year-old Wendy Jerome in 1984. He was 20 at the time. As Tanner Jubenville tells us tonight, police first got a break in the case when they used a new type of DNA testing to search for a suspect. Tanner?
Don, police told us earlier this is one of the first local criminal cases in which familial DNA testing was used to try and locate a suspect. Police say they did locate a suspect and make an arrest, making for an emotional week for the Jerome family.
I never thought I would see this day, and now it's here.
An emotional exchange of hugs and thanks from Wendy Jerome's mom Friday after waiting more than 35 years for an arrest in her daughter's death.
I just wish my husband had been alive to see this.
Police say 56-year-old Timothy Williams raped and fatally beat Wendy Jerome, leaving her body by a dumpster behind a school on Webster Avenue. Police say the suspect lived in that neighborhood at the time and didn't know Jerome.
So many of us are parents, and we grieve the loss of her child with her. But every conversation with her only made the investigators more determined to look harder at the case, find what may have been overlooked, and try a new angle.
Advancements in DNA testing in the 1990s and 2000s gave investigators hope for an arrest.
There's no witnesses to this brutal or horrific crime.
This year, Rochester police conducted familial DNA testing. They ran a DNA sample from the scene of the crime through a state database to find potential family members of the suspect, which gave them new investigative leads to follow.
We were able to narrow the list down to a few people. We were able to eliminate a bunch of people, and those people that we could not eliminate, we really focused in on.
Investigators say Williams' DNA was a match to evidence found at the crime scene. He was arrested in Florida this week, helping to bring some closure to the young victim's family.
I would like to thank everyone in this department who has gone to lengths to do this for us.
Now, Timothy Williams is still being held in Florida. Investigators say he will soon be extradited to New York to be arraigned on a second-degree murder charge. For now, we are live in Rochester. Tanner Jubinville, 13 Wham News.
Testimony will start tomorrow in the cold case murder trial of Timothy Williams, who was arrested nearly 40 years after the rape and murder of 14-year-old Wendy Jerome. 13 Wham's Jackie Napier was in the courtroom today as both sides presented their own statements to the jury. Jackie, good evening.
Good evening, Matt. Today, new details emerged about the death of the 14-year-old girl, 39 years after the day she was killed. Assistant District Attorney Lisa Gray told jurors about the Jerome family's Thanksgiving night in 1984. After making dinner, 14-year-old Wendy Jerome planned to walk to her friend's house.
Wendy never made it because the evidence will show that the defendant intercepted her on her walk, sexually assaulted her, and beat her to death.
Prosecutors say more than 3 decades later, advancements in forensic evidence unlocked the secrets hidden on Wendy's body and clothes. Investigators say a familial DNA search resulted in a DNA hit, leading them to identify Timothy Williams as a suspect.
You will start your analysis with the DNA, but that is not where the analysis ends. The question you will then ask yourself is, okay, what does the DNA and the physical evidence tell us?
As the trial progresses, the defense says jurors must consider if the people can prove that sexual contact happened at the same time as the beating. According to the prosecution's opening statement, jurors can expect to hear from investigators who interviewed the defendant, Timothy Williams, back in 1984. Live at the Hall of Justice, Jackie Napier, 13 Wham News.
Now to the stunning events today in a Rochester cold case. A mistrial declared in the case of Timothy Williams. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Malloy.
And I'm Karen Edwards. Williams had been on trial following his arrest decades after the rape and murder of 14-year-old Wendy Jerome. Jackie Napier explains why the judge declared that mistrial today. Jackie.
Good evening. Judge Thomas Moran says this was a case of juror misconduct. Now Monroe County District Attorney Sandra Dortley saying the prosecution is starting from scratch. Wendy Jerome's family members were left in tears when Judge Moran dismissed 16 jurors and announced a mistrial.
We were almost done today. We had about 7 witnesses left. We probably would have concluded our proof by tomorrow at the latest. You know, it's awfully frustrating, but we're going to start again and make sure that we can get justice for Wendy.
Witnesses testified that Wendy Jerome was raped, beaten, and killed after dropping off a birthday card to a friend. Nearly 4 decades later, Timothy Williams is standing trial in front of Wendy Jerome's loved ones.
I feel sorry for the family. You know, they've sat through this. We've shown crime scene pictures. We've shown autopsy pictures. There's a lot of people who worked on this case from 1984. This held a special place in their hearts. A lot of them could not ever forget that 14-year-old girl brutally murdered in that cold courtyard that Thanksgiving evening.
Both the defense and prosecution declined to comment on what exactly caused the mistrial. In court, Judge Moran told the jurors they did, quote, exactly what I told you not to do. Throughout the course of the trial, Moran gave several instructions to jurors, including to not research or attempt to research any facts or law related to the case. Jurors were also told to not discuss the case among themselves or with anyone else.
I believe we're seeing more and more jury issues as the years go on. You know, I just caution everyone, if you are selected for a jury service, you know, please be honest, be fair, be honest to yourself, and follow the rules.
Williams defense attorneys Jessica Niclario and Don Thompson tell me they're, quote, heartened by the court's appropriate safeguards under challenging conditions to ensure that the parties received a fair trial. Dorley says the attorneys will reconvene in court on Monday. Matt and Karen.
Jackie, thank you.
We also have breaking developments today in the case of a Rochester teenager who was raped and murdered nearly 40 years ago. Her accused killer now standing trial again. Testimony began this afternoon in the case against Timothy Williams, who was arrested decades after the death of Wendy Jerome. 13 WHAM's Jackie Napier joining us live from the Hall of Justice with the very latest tonight. Jackie, good evening.
Good evening, Matt. Matt, Timothy Williams' first trial was declared a mistrial this past December following allegations of juror misconduct. Now, 12 new jurors will determine if Mr. Williams is in fact guilty of murdering Wendy Jerome. Nearly 4 decades after Wendy Jerome was killed, prosecutors and defense attorneys delivered opening statements for the trial of her accused killer, Timothy Williams.
We gave an overview of the evidence that we intend to put forth during the course of the trial. You know, the most important thing I think that we laid out for the jury was, you know, her body was found on November 22nd of 1984. Her clothing was secured. And many, almost 40 years later, we were able to, through modern technology and science and DNA, examine her clothing, examine a vaginal smear that was taken during the course of the autopsy, and we were able to isolate DNA profiles that are consistent with the defendant in this case.
The prosecution's first witness, a retired Rochester Police Department investigator, described responding to a call on Thanksgiving 1984. Investigator Gary Galetta says he found Wendy Jerome's body, which Galetta says showed signs of significant trauma. Although this was nearly 40 years ago, there are some things you simply don't forget, says Dorley.
If you ask any of the investigators who were at the scene, this is one of the crime scenes that they will never, ever forget. So, you know, I'm very confident about their ability to recall their facts. And, of course, they were very, good in writing notes.
Although this is the second time Timothy Williams is being tried due to a mistrial in December, this will be the first time the prosecution presents some of its evidence.
We never finished our trial to begin with. We have a different judge. We're just going to make sure that we get the evidence in front of a jury. You know, I was never able to give a closing statement. So to me, this is a fresh start.
Matt, just moments ago, I received a statement from the defense attorneys that reads, quote, the prosecution alleges that Mr. Williams killed Wendy because a DNA profile generated from semen found on Wendy's body and clothes is consistent with Mr. Williams' DNA. The prosecution's theory relies on the assumption that the sexual contact happened contemporaneously with the fatal assault. The ultimate question in this case is semen evidence of murder? It is not. There is no other evidence that links Mr. Williams to the fatal assault because Mr. Williams did not kill Wendy Jerome. Again, that's a statement from defense attorneys Jessica Niclario and Donald Thompson. Live at the Hall of Justice, Jackie Napier, 13 WHAM News.
Breaking news and weather authority. This is 13 WHAM News at 6.
We begin with breaking news tonight. Nearly 40 years later, a verdict in a cold case murder investigation in Rochester. Timothy Williams now convicted of murdering 14-year-old Wendy Jerome on Thanksgiving in 1984.
My daughter, Wendy, was the sweetest, most caring little girl. This door is closed. After all these years, this door is closed. Will it ever be over? For me, no.
Wendy Jerome's family coming face to face with Williams in court as a jury found him guilty of murder. Good evening. I'm Karen Edwards in for Dawn. 13 WHAM's Jackie Napier was in the courtroom and spoke to the Jerome family about what this day means to them. Jackie.
Good evening, Karen. As jurors declared Timothy Williams guilty of the murder of 14-year-old Wendy Jerome, Wendy's aunt clutched her mother's hand and softly said, it's finally over. 14-year-old Wendy Jerome never returned home from delivering a birthday card to her friend on Thanksgiving Day 1984. That night, police found the 14-year-old's body near School 33. She had been brutally raped and murdered.
You know, as I said, justice delayed was not going to be justice denied for Wendy. We, after almost 40 years, we were able to get justice for her.
Decades after Jerome's death, police used familial DNA to identify a new suspect, Timothy Williams.
He lived in Wendy's neighborhood when she was killed. 2 members of the Rochester Police Department knocked on Williams' door in Florida.
We knew we had a killer, and we went down to get him. And when he found out we were from Rochester, his facial expressions completely changed. He knew the gig was up.
On Thursday, Williams testified that he had a consensual relationship with 14-year-old Wendy, but her family says that is not true. The jury convicted Williams of 3 counts of murder in the 2nd degree.
My daughter, Wendy, was the sweetest, most caring little girl in the whole world. And I just want everybody to know that no matter what was said, it wasn't true, and she is and always will be. My heart, I hurt.
The district attorney's office says this conviction is the first using familial DNA testing in New York State. The defense was not available for comment. Karen.
Jackie, thank you. We begin with breaking news. Day 1 of reckoning for a convicted killer nearly 40 years after the crime.
Timothy Williams learning his fate today in the 1984 murder of 14-year-old Wendy Jerome.
The last thing she saw was a face of pure evil. I love her and miss her every second of every day.
Wendy Jerome's mother coming face to face with the convicted murderer as he received 25 years to life. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Malloy.
And I'm Karen Edwards. Authorities say Timothy Williams spent decades living a double life until DNA came back to haunt him and eventually helped bring him to justice.
13 Wham's Jackie Napier has been covering this trial since the very beginning.
She is live from the Hall of Justice where she spoke with Wendy's family about what today means to them. Jackie.
That's right, Matt and Karen, good evening. Just before sentencing Timothy Williams, Judge Alex Renzi told the convicted murderer that finally the Jerome family would receive justice and he would be forced to face the consequences of his actions from November 1984.
His actions that night tore the hearts and souls out of her father, her brother, and myself. He destroyed all her hopes and dreams.
Following Wendy Jerome's murder, her mother Marlene says she promised to never give up the search for the killer. 40 years later, Wendy's family and friends packed the courtroom as Timothy Williams was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.
As far as sentencing goes, yes, I am so glad that he got what he deserved, as much as we could give him.
Wendy's brother Bill says he was scared to leave the house after his older sister's murder, haunted by the fact that her killer was still out there.
And for the first time, seeing in the darkness of my bedroom frightened me. When I did finally go out and play in the neighborhood to try and get back to normal, I found myself very wary of everyone, everything.
Williams took the stand during trial and claimed that he met the 14-year-old outside a corner store. Eventually, he says the two developed a consensual relationship.
The DNA and the other evidence at trial demonstrated that Mr. Williams and Wendy Jerome had sex, but there's no linkage between that and murder. That was our contention at trial. It's still our contention.
District Attorney Sandra Dorley told the court that version of events does not make any sense. Rather, she says Williams ambushed the 14-year-old on her way home.
He wasn't involved in any relationship with Wendy. He killed her. After 36 years, he thought he got away with murder. But he didn't. You didn't, Mr. Williams. You didn't get away with murder.
Defense attorneys confirmed they do plan to file an appeal. Live at the Hall of Justice, Jackie Napier, 13 Wham News.